Hello and welcome to Tween Bake Off Sweet. This is our first one of these, and today we're going to be making chocolate chip cookies. As with all of my things, we start with what you are provided and what you will need. So what you are provided is 12 ounces of bread flour. Should come in a bag something like this. A teaspoon of sea salt. I have high blood pressure, so I get to use this wonderful thing called no salt. Teaspoon of baking soda. 2 ounces of white sugar. It's going to be a small amount of white sugar. And 8 ounces of light brown sugar. We're going to have a lot more brown sugar than we are white sugar. Or some teaspoon and a half of vanilla extract, and 12 ounces, which is 1 bag of semi-sweet chocolate chips. Now, what you will need is you are going to need 2 sticks of butter, which is 8 ounces, preferably unsalted butter. You're going to need 2 large eggs, an ounce, which is about 2 tablespoons of whole milk. We prefer whole milk, but if you don't have whole milk, any kind of milk will work. All right, you're also going to need a saucepan, a sifter / a mesh strainer. This is a mesh strainer, so you can see me through it, but it's very, very fine. A stand mixer or a hand mixer, which we've got a hand mixer. Technically, yes, I have a stand mixer, but I'm using the hand mixer because it works better for everybody. That way, if you don't have a stand mixer, you're not relying on just stand mixer instructions. Baking sheets, and on those baking sheets, you're going to want to either put aluminum foil or parchment paper so that you can stop it from sticking to the baking sheet. And last but not least, you're also going to want a rubber spatula or a rubber scraper of some kind. All right, so into the instructions we go. Now, your first step says that you are going to melt the 2 sticks of butter in a saucepan over low heat and then set aside to cool. If you don't have a saucepan, which is, give me one moment. All right, so if you don't have a saucepan, which is something that would look like this, it's pretty shallow on the sides and a wide bottom. If you don't have one of those, you can definitely melt it in the microwave, and that will work perfectly fine. So with that in mind, that's what we're gonna do. You're gonna do it in bursts of 30 to 10 seconds. The more melted it gets, the closer to 10-second intervals you want to use. So when you're starting out, you can pop it in for 30 seconds, pop it in for another 30 seconds. And once it starts to get fairly liquidy, you're gonna scoot your way down to about 10-second intervals because you don't want to burn the butter. All right, so I'm gonna go melt my butter and I'll see you back here in a second. All right, moving on to step 2, we are going to sift together the flour, salt, and baking soda onto a paper plate. So there are 2 parts to step 2. So we're gonna start with that one. So you're going to take your mesh strainer, and I mean, it doesn't have to be a paper plate, but a paper plate works perfectly fine. You're going to take your bread flour, and the wonderful thing about sifting all of this together is you just dump it right into the mesh strainer because you want it to go through eventually anyway, so it's perfectly fine. All right, and then we're going to need a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of baking soda. So we get our teaspoon measuring cup, and you guys have it because you can just bloop, pop it right in. Teaspoon of salt, or in this case, non-salt. And then a teaspoon of baking soda. So we take our teaspoon and we scrape it off to make sure it's nice and level and even. And we pop that in too. All right, and then what you're going to do to sift, it's a very complicated process, I know. You're going to take it by the handles and shake it or tap it gently to get it to sift through. Now you don't want to go too high above the paper plate because what you're looking to do is get most of it on the paper plate, not around the paper plate. So you're going to want to stay pretty close and just gently tap back and forth until all of it sifts through. So now that we have our beautiful mountain of sifted flour, we're going to put that to the side and we're going to move on to step 2 of step 2. All right, so now step 2, we're going to take our butter that we melted, and to that butter we're going to add our white sugar. Just dump it right on in. That's fine. We're not being fancy about this. And we're going to take our brown sugar and also just dump that right on in, and then we're going to beat that on medium for about 2 minutes. Depending on your hand mixer or your mixer, usually medium speed is about 3 to 2 depending. All right, so just take it easy. Don't try and go all the way to 5 or whatever the top number is, because that's going to create a big old mess. All right, so 2 minutes on a timer, beat it for that time, and then we'll move on to the next step. All right, so now we move on to step 3, and we're going to need another bowl, something, you know, a cereal bowl or a small bowl that you have on hand is fine. You're going to want to whisk, or personally my favorite is to use just a simple fork. It's just as effective and a lot simpler in the long run, actually. So we're going to take our 2 eggs, we're going to crack one whole one into the bowl. Okay, beautiful. And then with the second one, we only want the yolk. So what we're going to do is we're going to separate the yolk from the white. So in order to do this, oh, gee willikers. In order to do this, what you're going to do is you're going to take your egg and you're going to crack it very gently, and you're going to make sure you hold it upright, okay? So once we're upright, we can watch that white just pour into the bowl. Because we're not using it for anything else, we don't really have to worry about it. Now you can use the eggshells, but I personally prefer to use my hands. All right. Don't worry about the white stuff on the sides. That's actually just part of the albumin that helps the yolk stay to the center of the egg. All right, I gotta wash my hands because it's got raw egg on them. All right, and we put our trash to the side. We'll deal with that with cleanup in a minute. So we've got our yolk and our whole egg. To this, we are going to add the milk. So we're just going to pour that right on in. That's why I like putting it in little bowls of its own, because then it's a lot simpler than having to measure everything out. So then we're going to also put in a teaspoon and a half, which is already measured out for you guys, of vanilla extract. So 1 and a half. Beautiful. You really don't need very much vanilla. It is very strong. And it is not fun to taste all by itself. I will tell you that right now. It does not taste as good as it smells. So we're going to whisk these things together. If you're using a fork, this is how you do it. You're going to take your bowl, you're going to tilt it, you're going to put your fork in, and then you're just going to spin it around. And this is going to whisk your milk, your eggs, and your vanilla together. And basically what you're looking for is what is called a homogeneous mixture. It means you can't see the egg white floating around. It kind of looks like grease almost, but it's not. It's not greasy. It's just, it's got properties of things like hydrophobia, which is it doesn't like to attach to water or liquids in general, whereas the yolk loves liquids. It loves to attach to stuff. And that's why sometimes you'll hear eggs called emulsifiers. If you want to get really fancy, you can just do this. It is literally just this motion over and over and over again. You get super used to it. It's super easy to do, especially when you're doing a small amount like this. If you have got an actual large amount of eggs, use a real whisk. Okay, so that's a pretty homogeneous mixture. It's bubbly, but it is not really that you can see too much of the white. All right, so now we're gonna turn our mixer down to slow, and we're going to very slowly add our egg mixture in, all right? So, on it goes. So very slowly, which is just really a trickle rather than a dump. So mix this until it's thoroughly combined, which is about 30 seconds. So that should be good. And then we'll move on to step 4. All right, so we're gonna take our lovely dry ingredients that we already sifted together. Now, if you have a stand mixer, you can put it to slow and you can continuously mix it as you go. With a hand mixer, it's slightly different because you're trying to control how much of the powdered ingredients go in. So we're just gonna put in a little bit. Not like a little bit, but definitely not all of it at once. There we go. That's about, you know, a quarter of it. And we're gonna put our mixer back onto the bowl, and we're going to stir. Well, we're going to mix. Now, when you're adding dry ingredients, you're going to kind of get this poof of flour, which is why we don't go for a high speed right away. We go with a lower speed to try and incorporate as much of the flour without setting off a big boom of dust. Make sure you get on the side. And we add a little bit more when it is a little bit further together. Yeah, between a quarter and a third. And the nice thing about paper plates, they fold in together and they make a little slide. So, now we mix this one in. It's gonna get a little bit harder to keep mixing, but that's okay. That means that our flour is combining and we want that. All right, so before we add our last batch in of our flour, we're gonna take our rubber scraper and we're gonna scrape down the sides because as you can see, a whole bunch of flour has made it to the sides of the bowl. So we're gonna scrape down the sides and make sure that we tap that in. Because we want to make sure we're getting all of the deliciousness. Because all of this is going to make some fantastic chocolate chip cookies. So, with that, we add our last little bit of the flour in. Mix this up. And when this is mixed up, if you have a stand mixer, you are more than welcome to turn it to stir. If you have a hand mixer, we're going to switch from the hand mixer to the rubber scraper and stir in our chocolate chips. So I will see you when this is all mixed up and when we're ready to add some chocolate chips. All right, so all of our flour is combined into our dough. So now we're gonna add the whole bag of chocolate chips. And this, you don't have to worry about adding it all at once or not adding it all at once. Pour it in. I mean, if you want a less chocolatey or chippy cookie, all right, that's up to you. That's your call. I personally am going to use the whole bag. So, then with this, you're going to go in and you're going to stir and kind of fold in the chips, which means you go under and then through. So, under and through, because you're wanting to make sure that you get those chips all through the dough. Otherwise, it's going to be really chippy in some areas, and some areas are going to have no chips in them. So you want to make sure you get a nice even amount of spread between the chips and the cookie dough. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Now here comes both the fun step and the step that's going to be where we talk about cleanup. So, once you have all of your cookies, your chips mixed into your cookie dough, you're going to cover this with plastic wrap or aluminum and stick it in the fridge and chill it for an hour. 1 hour, so set a timer. While it is chilling in the fridge for 1 whole hour, you can wash the dishes that you used, so that way your parents don't have to. That's part of cooking, is taking responsibility for the mess you make. Now, I'm not saying you have to do this, but this would be an excellent opportunity to do that, and also to show your parents that you care. All right, I will see you all in 1 hour when our dough is chilled. All right, so it has now been an hour. Our lovely cookie dough has chilled. So we're going to preheat our oven to 375. I've got my oven going right now. That's 375. And you're going to put your oven racks towards the top and the bottom of your oven. We're not trying to go for middle ground here. We're trying to go top, bottom. So I usually use this spoon when I am doing cookies because it's a little bit larger than your average spoon, but it's not quite like a big spoon. It's a medium spoon. It works for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to scoop the dough into portions onto either parchment or aluminum foil lined baking sheets. And yeah, we're going to bake 2 sheets at a time for 15 minutes and rotate them halfway through. This is to make sure everything gets an even amount of cooking time. So, take your spoon, and you're going to pick up a good amount, and I'd say that's pretty good. And you're going to just push it off with your finger and pop it down. And you're just going to do this over and over and over again until you've run out of dough. So normally what I do is I will do 4 long ways and 3 across, which gets me about 12 cookies per sheet. So with 2 sheets, we're gonna have about 24 cookies. If you have dough left over, put it back into the fridge while those cookies cook, bring it back out, and we're gonna just keep doing that until we run out of dough. All right, so I filled up my cookie sheets, and I was even a little generous, and there is more than enough cookie dough left, so we're going to do this a couple times. We're going to put these into the oven once it is fully preheated at 375 for 15 minutes. A timer is your best friend when it comes to baking. All right, so let's throw them in. 1 on top. 1 on bottom. And remember, rotate the pans halfway through. I will see you in 15 minutes when we will get to look at our delicious cookies. All right, so our timer just went off, so let's take our cookies out of the oven and see how we do. Ooh, they're a little bit dark. But that's okay because we also have a lot of brown sugar in here, so that's fine. So we're going to let these cool for a minute, and because I was pretty generous with the amount of cookie dough I put on there, they've kind of morphed into not entirely a solid cookie mass, but kind of a cookie brick. But that's okay because that's the fun part. You know what? It's still all going to get eaten, and it'll all look the same in the end. So it's fine. These are for me and my family, not for anything professional or fun. Well, fun, yes, because it's cookies. All right, so that concludes Tween's Bake Off Sweet. You're going to keep repeating the last step of cooking them for 15 minutes and rotating them halfway through till you're out of cookie dough. And I hope to see many of you at our next Tween Bake Off, which is savory, where we're going to learn how to make white bread. That most basic of ingredients that we all kind of use. All right, see you next time. Bye!